Hello and welcome to A Woman's Heart. This is Lisa Granger. Have you ever thought the Bible was boring? One of the first things our guest was told when teaching Sunday school was don't bore those kids with the Bible. It's the most exciting book ever. And it is. Barbara loves to write biblical fiction with some of the lesser known people in the Bible. And after a battle with cancer, she felt drawn to write some contemporary fiction. I have read many of her books, including her latest, Escape to Whispering Creek, which is on this summer's reading list. For the complete summer reading list and other resources, go to my website, lisagranger.com. And now for our conversation with Barbara. Welcome to A Woman's Heart. Barbara, I am very excited about getting to speak to you again. So welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here with you, Lisa, and your listeners again.
Yes. Well, for those that had not heard your previous interview, we have Barbara Britton. And tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe what's been going on, and something fun that isn't normally in your bio.
Well, I am in Wisconsin. I'm the mom of two young adult boys, and my oldest just turned 30, which is kind of
oh, my. That means you're more than 35.
Gut check there. But no, I'm excited to be here and just enjoying, the dog days of summer.
Yes. Well, and it is. We're having we have some weather coming through our area for the next week or so. But yes, it is. It's kind of winding down on the summer, a couple of cooler days here and there. And you have been busy writing many more books since last we spoke. And I really enjoyed your latest one was Escape to Whispering Creek. And it's actually more of a continuation of another one that you did. So tell us about some of that story about, where this one came from and where it started.
Well, I was known for writing biblical fiction about little known Bible characters, and I loved doing that.
Yes.
But I'm also a breast cancer survivor, so 9 years breast cancer free.
Yay.
And I felt God putting on my heart that I should write a story and include a breast cancer angle. But it would be very hard to do that in biblical fiction. Mm-hmm. So I did what they tell you not to do as an author. And I hopped out of my genre of biblical fiction and wrote a contemporary romance called Christmas at Whispering Creek, where my protagonist, Samantha, is 23 years old and has lost a breast to breast cancer. And it's a romance and it's lighthearted. So you don't need a whole box of Kleenex when you read it. But God also nudged me in the back of that book to put my own real life story. So readers can read what I went through. I was given, this is the best case scenario. And after a lumpectomy, it turned out to be the worst case scenario. Ooh, okay. And that's difficult to go through. Mm-hmm. But God was with me every step of the way. And that's what I portrayed in Christmas at Whispering Creek with Samantha, because she relied very heavily on God through her breast cancer journey. Mm-hmm. And then Samantha had this wonderful friend, Emma, in Christmas at Whispering Creek. And I wasn't really planning to do a sequel, but an agent originally interested in Christmas at Whispering Creek had me write 3 blurbs for a series.
Oh, okay.
And so I had a blurb for the second book, and I just loved Emma because she was kind of bold and she just spoke her mind. And so Escape to Whispering Creek is Samantha's best friend Emma's story, and she falls in love with Cole's brother Wade, who in the first book is recovering from a traumatic auto accident. Okay. So it's their story. And in this one, I kind of looked at it from the theme of where is God when your life is falling apart?
Yes.
Now, as a Christian, we know God is right there with us, but that doesn't mean you're not going to feel anxious or a little dread. I certainly, when I was laying there on the gurney, knowing my surgery was going to be over 6 hours, I had a little nerves going on. Yeah. And I knew God was there with me, but I still was nervous. So this is where is God when your life is falling apart? And Emma's life gets set off course by some white-collar crime. Her bosses are basically scam artists. Yeah. And so she heads off to Whispering Creek to get out of all the commotion that's going on in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she does. And I was like, oh my gosh. And you just feel for her. Here's this sweet, well, yeah, and she's bold too, but there's this nice girl really looking forward, thinking she's gotten her life on track, and she's looking forward to the direction she thinks it's going to go in. And then just kind of the whole world bottoms out, and then trying to put everything back together. And then, everything else that happens when that happens, because even though she didn't do anything wrong, simply by her association, there were complications and some implications to that kind of kept popping up in the most awkward places.
Right. And so I follow her through this journey of trying to get her life back on track. And of course, she falls in love. And then, of course, if you know the romance formula, there has to be a black moment where the hero and heroine break apart, and then they come back together. And so that happens in this book. But Emma's key verse in this book is Psalm 18:2. Mm-hmm. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. So that's the first part of that verse. And that's what she clings to.
Yes.
And part of the story is that was the rock that sits under a cactus in this Sunday school project she made in the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. And the cactus has engorged that rock, but she remembers that verse, and that helps her get through all these complications that arise, and that she's wondering where God is. She's praying, but things are going from bad to worse. But God is there, and she has the mentor character, Samantha, speaking into her life and saying, hey, I'm praying for you. I'll be here with you. God is here with you.
Now, have you found, you mentioned some of this being based in your own personal journey through breast cancer and some others. Have you found that to be a huge comfort for yourself in those moments, is to have like an anchor verse or something like that to help you through?
Yes. In fact, when I was writing Christmas at Whispering Creek, I gave Samantha the verses that I really clung to, which was Philippians 4:4-7, where we're told not to be anxious, but to bring our concerns and prayers to God, and he would guard our hearts and our minds. And so that was the key verses in Christmas at Whispering Creek. And one of them is mentioned in Escape to Whispering Creek. But yes, I find that I love putting scripture in my books, and it just is a comfort to the character, but it also helps us remember that there is scripture that speaks into our lives.
Now, how does God work through that? When you're writing about these, yes, it's a fictional story, but there's elements of it that are very personal, at least in this series. And how do you find that God works through that writing to build your faith? I mean, we know that your faith is affecting the writing. And then how does that process come back and just kind of create a nice circle?
Well, sometimes it surprises you. So I grew up in a wonderful home, but it wasn't a Christian home. And Emma's parents are not believers. Samantha, her best friend, took her to church, and Jesus is her best friend, and she lives that out, but her parents aren't believers. And so I didn't even think about this as an angle in my story, but my mom came to faith through Bible Study Fellowship, which, if you know, Bible Study Fellowship is a really in-depth
That's a very intense Bible study.
My mom didn't even own a Bible. So she goes off to Bible Study Fellowship, and she discovers, like, I'm not a Christian. I don't know Jesus. I don't have a relationship with Jesus. And so she became a Christian, gave her life to Jesus Christ. But my father wasn't a Christian. And he's like, well, that's fine for you. But he didn't come to church with us. So my mom continued to go to church and bring my sister and I, where we came to love Jesus. And then we moved from California back to Connecticut. And for some reason, when we got up to go to church one Sunday, my dad came with us. Okay. And my dad's been gone 28 years. If you know my story of breast cancer, I carry the BRCA1 gene, and that's, I got it through my father, who died of pancreatic cancer 28 years ago, because there's a link between the BRCA1, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and ovarian cancer. So I wish I would have asked him, what made you go to church with us? Was it that you moved to a new state and you didn't know anyone, or you thought someone would think my mom was widowed, and then when he finally became a Christian, he was baptized, and he said he had seen a change in my mom. And I wish I could go back and ask him. Because at the time, I was a lot younger. I'm a teenager. It's not really, something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's not really a question teenagers ask their dad.
And I would be, what was it that you saw in my mom that you knew Jesus was real? I mean, was it just the change in her attitude? Was it just the joy in her life? What was that change? So, but that comes out in this story, and that Emma starts to worry when things get a little chaotic in the book. She worries about the safety of her parents and that they're not believers.
Yeah.
And so that is a big concern for her. And I wasn't even thinking of my own background at the time, but I was saying, wow, I can remember when I worried for my father that, we were all Christian and he was not. And we were praying and praying. And then finally he did give his life to Jesus Christ. But I wasn't even thinking about that being in the book. And, I'm like, wow. Where did this come from? But God uses a lot of things that you don't even think about in your life to speak into the words that you're writing in a fictional story.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that it was still a supportive environment and that your mom and your dad did eventually become Christians. So that was a huge answer to prayer. Now, were they, your journey as an author, how did that come about? Did you always want to write? Were you always writing, or totally different, and then never thought you'd write and then you became an author?
I never thought I would become an author. That was not on my radar screen. It obviously was on God's. Mm-hmm. But I was teaching children Bible stories every week in chapel. And my husband gave me some advice. He's an ordained minister. And I use it in my writing too, but he said, when you teach those children a Bible story, don't just teach them a story, teach them why that story is in the Bible. And he said, don't bore those kids with the Bible. It's the most exciting book ever. Yes. So when I write, I try to, why is this Bible story important? And of course, there's always action and adventure and fiction. But I was just writing curriculum for chapel because I had kindergarten through 5th grade all at one time in a gymnasium.
Wow, that's quite the age spread.
Right. And it's hard to find curriculum for that large of an age gap.
Yeah.
So I would write a lot of curriculum, and I just prayed one time, Lord, please hit me with some creativity. I got to finish these lessons. And I finished the lessons, and I just got a prompting to sit down and write. And it's interesting that the first books I wrote were very sweet, but they weren't biblical fiction or anything to do with the Bible. And then I thought, well, I teach about Bible stories. I will write about a Bible story. And my first book was a takeoff of the story of Naaman. It wasn't exact. But then I just got this prompting to keep going. And I got to say, that's got to be God, because I never thought I would be an author. And it was such a big learning curve to go from not knowing anything about writing or the writing business and try and get a book published. And it took me a while. I mean, I started writing in 2007, and I didn't get a book contract until 2015.
Wow.
So it was a long journey, but I just felt that I had joy, and I felt God was giving me this journey and this joy. And I became a published author. Now I'm multi-published author. And I look at this pile of paper that I've written, because I write longhand and then I type it into the computer.
There you go. There's something to be said about that pen and paper.
It is. I can take it anywhere and just relax with it and write. Yeah. And I look at these manuscripts that I write, and I really, I say, I don't know how I did that. That's God and the Holy Spirit. I always pray before I write, and that's the Holy Spirit giving me ideas and helping me get through this story.
Yeah.
And it's such a blessing. There's a lot of work to be done as an author, but it is such a blessing. And I just thank God that He keeps giving me the passion to write and the story ideas that keep popping in my head. So I am just blessed to be an author. And I just thank God that He gives me creativity and for His word, that I keep learning. I've been a Christian a long time now, and I keep learning something new about the Bible all the time.
Well, and I know that I've read your series about the daughters of Zelophehad. It was Zelophehad?
I always say Zelophehad, but we really don't know.
Yeah, we don't really know. So close enough. And they're very small. They're just mentioned a few times in the Old Testament during Exodus but they were significant in that he only had daughters. And when when they were dividing the land up, it was like, hello, he only had daughters. We can't have anything except what we marry for. He needs to have an inheritance as well that goes to us. And some people were not happy about that. And Moses went, well, you kind of have a point. Let me go ask God. And then, in the Bible, God said, yes, you give the daughters a portion of land, which was unheard of back then. So they are significant in that. But I love the backstories that you give them, even though not everything is biblical or scriptural. It certainly could have happened that way. And I enjoyed them as well. And what are some of the things you learned other than just diving into them and to, kind of obscure characters? What are some of the other lessons you think God taught you through that process?
Well, looking at the daughters of Zelophehad, that was such a bold ask. And I always wonder, where did they get that bravery? They obviously had a big faith in God. And I always say that's a David and Goliath story for girls.
I like that.
A lot of the characters that I write about, like the daughters of Shalom in the story of Nehemiah, that was bold. They were working on the wall, and women, they're named, but not any other women are named as construction workers. And also, Ittai the Gittite, who stuck close to David and was a Philistine. And David put a Philistine over a third of his army, which just totally blows my mind.
Yeah.
That he do that. So that Ittai had to have this wonderful faith that people knew about. So just, the word coming alive, and how many stories involve women.
Yeah.
And God blesses men, he blesses women. Some of those stories I had no idea were in the Old Testament. And it was such a joy to find them and to learn more about how God used these people and what characteristics they had that we can use today. The boldness, going boldly and asking for something.
Yeah.
After you say that in prayer and have people pray for you. We see that with Esther. I haven't written about her, but before she goes in to the king, she's got people fasting and praying for her. And to have that prayer support and just know we serve an amazing, awesome God that we love.
Well, and you think these stories or these people we still know about. We may not know a lot about them, but we still know about them thousands of years later. So obviously they were worth mentioning, because there's plenty of other people in the Bible that we may know what happened, but we are never given a name. And these people were given names. And we have that. It must have been significant or for us to learn from. And as you're talking, you mentioned that David had Hittite, the Philistine, over his army, or Hittai, and that was a fun one. I read that one as well. And it just causes me to remember how God can use some of the more unlikely people that we may look at someone and go, no, that's not. They're either, we write them off because of a physical feature or because of a race, a gender, a situation, or whatever. We may write them off for some reason, but God can still use that. And I think that's so important to remember.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun of going back and reading the Old Testament. A lot of people kind of disregard it. Maybe the New Testament is more fun, but there are some just fabulous stories in the Old Testament that still speak for today. I'm actually working on a Bible project right now in the New Testament that involves Jesus, and that has even more complications when you don't want to speak too much into Jesus and you only use what he said. Then how do you bring him about? And that's when you have the disciples and other characters that interacted with him, and that's a whole new set of writing challenges than when you stick to the Old Testament.
Yeah, well, and that was going to be one of my questions is, are you going to stick with contemporary, or is there more biblical fiction in your future? And it sounds like there's some more biblical fiction in your present and in your future.
Yeah, I really like writing contemporary. The names are easier, and now we have technology, so they can get text messages and all the technology that you don't have in biblical times that kind of you have to slow your story down because they're writing a mule, they can't send a text. But I am working on New Testament project, which I never thought I would write in the New Testament, but God said, oh, no, I've got plans for you. So I visited Israel in 2023. And while I was sitting on the Sea of Galilee, I kept praying, Lord, I don't know what you want me to write next. Show me what you want me to write next. And as I'm sitting on a boat in the Sea of Galilee, I just felt that this is what I should be writing about. And so that's the project I'm finishing up now, is Jesus traveling around the Sea of Galilee.
Oh, so good.
It's been phenomenal to write that. More difficult than writing an Old Testament story, but I've really enjoyed writing about and focusing on who is Jesus and the lives that were changed, that these people that came face to face with Jesus and his compassion and his power. Yeah. It's been wonderful.
Yes. Well, I am glad that you were able to go to Israel in 23. Obviously, you went before the unrest. We'll just that's putting it mildly, obviously. But before everything else, and I know I was blessed to be able to go shortly before everything kind of turned upside down over there. And it's amazing to just know that, oh my gosh, I am in places that Jesus could have walked. It's a very profound and powerful feeling on that. Now, back to your writing journey a little bit. What were some of the things you mentioned? You were just writing curriculum and then just kind of felt God really calling you to do that. What were some of the things that people did around you? Because, as much as we know that God is with us and we can feel that calling, it took quite a while. It took several years before you were published. I'm going to go out on a limb and suspect that there might have been a few days you were a little discouraged, and maybe there were some things. Well, what were those things that people did around you to encourage you and help spur you on to keep going?
Well, and writing is a community. You have to have people around you that support and encourage you, because it can be a very challenging business, because it's subjective. Some people might like what you wrote. Some people may not. So I always say not every book is for every reader. But someone thinks is 5-star, someone might give 2 stars. I mean, we all have our favorite tropes. Sometimes we have what they call now triggers in books, that we don't like that storyline and we just get all upset. But yes, I joined professional writing organizations, and I had people around me that really encouraged me to keep going. I had critique partners that would look at my work and say, Barb, you can do better. I remember when I finished up Building Benjamin, I had an ending to that, and my critique partner read it, and I thought it was pretty cute and it was good. And she looked at me and she said, nope, this is not the ending to the book. You can do better.
Wow.
And I'm so happy she said that, because I love how I revamped it and redid it, and it was perfect for that book. And so you need people to speak truthfully about what you're writing, and critique partners make my writing better. I mean, they'll say, well, what about this? Well, I don't find this believable, or no, you need to add this line here. And it's the perfect line. Yeah. So you need that support system, because this is a very difficult business, and it's changed with the invention of the internet, the rise of indie publishing, which is great. And that gives you another avenue, right?
Yeah, it does.
You can be traditionally published today, or indie published, or both. So, but you do need people that believe in you, that believe that in your stories, and that come alongside you and encourage you along the way. Because I can remember I had gotten my first book contract, and it was through a writing program. So I didn't have an agent. And I still don't. I always say God's my agent, because I have been trying to get an agent for year after year. And that's another thing where you just shrug and you keep going. But I can remember I went to my first Christian conference and had an agent tell me there was no place for me in publishing, because I wrote biblical fiction and I wrote it on the shorter end. And I always thought to myself, what if I had heard that and I didn't have a book contract? Would that have discouraged me?
Yeah.
Would I have stopped writing? And so you have to really just take it to God. I just always pray before I write. I feel blessed. It brings me joy. And I have people that say, yeah, I like this. Keep going. Yeah. So you need all those things. First and foremost, you just pray to God and rely on Him. And you have friends that are encouraging and support you along the way, and Christian publishers that support you along the way. So it takes a community of writers to get you through the tough times and encourage you to keep going.
Yeah.
Because it can be a long journey, and some people give up and try other things, and other people stick with it. So.
Yeah, well, that almost sounds like the answer, or at least part of the answer, to the other question of what would you say to encourage someone else to pursue that passion that God has placed in their hearts?
I always tell writers, if you're committed to getting a book out into the world, number one, start saving, because everything costs money.
Yeah.
Number two, you've got to join these wonderful professional organizations like American Christian Fiction Writers or Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Different organizations are out there, local writers groups. And you need to get involved and learn the business of writing and also the craft of writing. And don't be afraid. A lot of authors are afraid, or new writers, wow, I can't show my work to anyone. Someone might steal my idea.
Oh.
Tropes have been out there forever. They're the same trope, mail order brides, trapped by the storm. They're all out there. Mm-hmm. But only you can write your characters the way you want to write them. So your book is going to be different than anybody else's. But you need that critique group support system, because there's a business of writing and then there's the craft side of writing.
Yes.
And just continue to enter contests, get feedback, submit. Once you feel that your book is ready, submit it to a publisher or to an agent or to an editor and see what they say. They might love it as much as you, but it takes a while. I sold my fourth book, so I had written 4 books before I sold one. So sometimes the first book may not sell. That's your learning, vehicle. Sometimes it might, but a lot of times that first or second book is under the bed, and it might be pulled out later. My third book I pulled out later and revamped it, and that was published as Until June. A lot of books, I have a few that are under the bed and probably won't see the light of day because I didn't know the genre. I was writing a middle grade, but I thought it was YA. And so you have to know the genre you're writing, the word count you want to hit, a lot of the business and structural.
Some of the technical aspects of it.
Technical aspects that you need to hit when you're submitting a work.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And Barbara, how can people connect with you and they can find out about your contemporary works, your latest one, or Escape to Whispering Creek, which does have that little element of suspense in there, and is contemporary. And then also they can find your biblical fiction, which I found also very enjoyable. So what's the best way for them to get your books and connect with you?
I have a website, BarbaraMBritton.com, and all my social media is Barbara M. Britton at Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And Escape to Whispering Creek, the ebook comes out September 27th. Okay. And then the print book hits on October 31st. So that should be an interesting launch date for the print book. So.
Yes. So maybe you can dress up as the characters.
Yeah.
For Halloween.
That's true. I never thought about that.
Yes. You can dress up as your characters for Halloween.
So, some authors do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an idea. I'll have to think about that.
Okay. Very good. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it and want to encourage people to check out your books, the contemporary and the biblical fiction. And I will look forward to seeing the new stuff that you come out with.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Lisa. It's been a joy to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me today on A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. I encourage you to explore Barbara's books and connect with her. Her information will be in the show notes on my website, along with the complete summer reading list on lisagranger.com. This wraps up the summer reading series for this summer. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. We have some great guests lined up for the fall that you don't want to miss. Have a blessed day.